Hey everyone, I forgot to switch this to English, so okay, so I'm gonna start my stream today, and I'll try to start posing this week, and then I think I'll start doing the heads, well, more details on the heads, and like putting more hair on top of it, and trying to get some like cloth designs or some designs onto the model. So I'm looking at the reference, and I'm like currently considering I was in the middle of like thinking about would it be a scythe she's gonna have or a knife, and I came to the conclusion that scythe could be a different character, and then this character could have a knife. So currently I'm thinking about a knife, maybe twin knife, so double knife, or a big one-handed knife, I guess. Bigger than the two ones. So, well, if it's too big, it's not gonna be a knife, but yeah, you get the point. So, yeah, let's get posing, and let's see. I'm not gonna do a complex pose for this one. I think it's better to have a simple pose and then do some like fancy stuff on the cloths compared to the posing. So let's see. Transpose master, transpose, and then move. I think it's better to do the legs first. Could you guys hear me fine? Yeah. I should move the chats on the side monitor. Oh hey, welcome to the stream. It's only a base mesh, but yeah, I think it's not bad for a 2 hours sculpt. I think it was 2 hours last time. I'm currently thinking about the pose, but I'm not sure if like standing still is the answer. So I need to think about some pose. And usually when you do the posing, if this part of the like shoulders and the hips are totally straight, it's gonna be really weird. So usually you wanna have some like counterweight happening, like something like this, and then maybe a twist on the head would be better. If you have any questions related to ZBrush, feel free to ask. Maybe I'll just focus on the sculpting today, but usually I'll try to answer my questions as much as possible. Have you thought about the hairstyles of the characters? Not yet, but like I have a rough idea of like what kind of like stuff I want. But it's not confirmed yet, so it really depends on what kind of like pose at the end she's gonna have. Hey! Hey, welcome. It's been a rough week today. No, rough week this week. So my mood is not really high. I'll try to keep it in a light mood. Yeah, I haven't followed up on the Kiryu Koko related stuff, but yeah. If you're a fan of her, then yeah, it's been a rough day. Usually I get a lot of questions related to posing, so if you're wondering how to pose, this is how to pose. Basically, just masking and then using Gizmo 3D to like rotate the positions. Nothing too hard or nothing out of the ordinary. Hey, welcome. It's like for me, it's easy for me to pose because you don't really have so much parts or like subtools to move around, so I can like go on like easy posing compared to the late posing afterwards. It really depends on like the person you're sculpting or like the parts you're sculpting. And since I don't really have any like hard symmetrical parts, so I'm gonna try to pose this earlier on, so I have a better idea of like what kind of like pose I can do or what kind of like pose I should do. Honestly, if you prefer to like pose it later on, it's your choice, but in general, it's better to pose it earlier on, so you have the like you don't need to bother with like a lot of like subtools now and then. Like for example, if you have a hard surface and then it needs to be symmetry, and then you want that symmetry to go through, and then you want to keep those kind of like symmetry, you can do the posing later on. But if you don't really have a lot of hard surfaces, and like you don't really have a lot of like subtools, then it's going to be easy for you to just pose it now compared to later on. And you have more time to actually fix this stuff. Is it better to use an IMM brush or masking extract sculpt from hair? Depends. You can use both. I prefer to use IMMs, but if you're getting a better result on the IMM brushes or masking, it really depends on what kind of like workflow you prefer. I just prefer IMMs, but both are valid use of like making hairs. And also you can use Z-spheres as well, or you can just use the IMM to like insert a sphere and then just like move it around, so you can use everything. Yeah, if you have a gaming background, I can see why it could be odd to see people posing right now. I think you'd prefer to like keep the T-pose as much as possible. But for me, like having a T-pose and then having a really symmetrical face, it kind of like kills the characters. Like it's hard to see the characters like expressions without posing, so for me it's gonna be really hard. So I'd prefer to like break the symmetries as much as possible and then quickly as possible. Hmm. Yeah, exactly. You have more freedom at the beginning. Hmm. I'm not sure if I should hide the arms because currently you can't really see them from the front. So by the way, if you're posing a model and then if you're like wondering what kind of like angle this should or like this should be, or like if you're like adjusting the pose and then if you want to slightly change the angles, you can go to transform axis rotation and then you can assign a key to these. Like for example, if I assign a K to the rotation and then another J to the rotation, and then if you press, I have to use pen on, but if I disable this, you can like rotate the model like this, like pressing K. You have like for each K press, it's gonna like rotate the angle like five degrees. you can do the opposite as well, like pressing J. And also you can use, like, if you're even if you're tilted like this, you can press J to like rotate it 5 degrees. So if you're wondering how to change the like camera angle slightly in a fixed axis, you can use this feature, transform axis rotation. And also you can use pen, which if you press J and then until you let go of J, the pen stroke will control how much the rotation you can have. And then if you press K, you can do the same thing as well. And this is controlled by the axis here. So if you want the y-axis to rotate, you can do the same thing. And then if you want the z-axis to rotate, and then if you want the x-axis to rotate, yeah, so you get the picture. It's pretty handy to have if you're like wondering what kind of like looks you're looking for, or like if you're like slightly adjusting things and then if you're finalizing things, or if you're looking at the face of the model and then like wondering where the cheeks should be, stuff like those. It's handy for those kind of like users. Okay, let's go back to each subtools, and then maybe adjust the eyes slightly. Hey George. Hey Peter. Doing fine. It's been a rough day, or a rough week for me, but yeah, I'm doing fine. Usually after the pose, you're gonna like change the models anyways. So unless you're like, if you want to like keep your hands symmetrical or something like that, it should be fine. Usually your hands are going to change anyways, so most of the time you're not going to realize, unless like your hand is like 5% bigger or something like that. It's not going to affect the entire model's quality. Do you think taking 5 minutes break after every 20 minutes you work can make a difference? Yeah, I know a couple of people doing that kind of stuff. Like for example, they take a 5 minutes or 10-minute break for each hour or something like that. Some people do that for like keeping their momentum going and not burning out. But for me, like reigniting the engines are harder for me to like keep on going, so I usually not prefer to do that, but if it works for you, then I think it's working well. I see a couple of like illustrators doing some like methods like that, like putting a clock next to you, and then I see one case where if you do 45 minutes of work, then you can take 15 minutes of break or something like that. Yeah, exactly, George. Like, it's the same for me. Like, if I start like doing some breaks or like taking too much breaks, then it's gonna be an entire break for me. Then I can't really go back to the work. So for me, it doesn't work. So it really depends. I prefer to do like 8 hours of like straight up sculpting compared to a couple of hours of stuff. Well, my casual sculpting, like I do 4 hours of like sculpting, then take lunch, and then taking 1 hour break, and then usually going back to like 4 hours of sculpt. And if I need to do it for like a work or something like that, then I'll just like straight up do 8 hours of sculpt without like lunch. I know there's a couple of like applications where you can restrict your access to some websites during your like preset time. so you don't really get distracted, and like you can keep production values up. But for me, like I used it for a while, but it didn't really work. Like I kept going back and forth between like tasks, and then during that task, like I had to access a couple of sites, and then like I had to keep going back and forth between like using that on and off and stuff. It was just like taking more time to actually going back and forth to like switch it on and off. Same for like sleep. There's a scientist talking about the latest like research in sleeping, and he recommends like waking up for each like 2 hours or so, making that effective compared to like 8 hours straight up sleeping. And he was like talking about like people should sleep 2 hours a day in intervals, and then trying to like keep that kind of like cycle going. And I was like, I can't go back to sleep if I just woke up. So yeah, people prefer to have like weird methods for each person. So I don't know if it's gonna fit you or not, but you should find your way of like sleeping or like working. Yeah, if people start recommending me like 2 hours period, like 2 hours cycle of sleep, like it's gonna give me a headache. I prefer to sleep much more longer. Yes. Yeah, some do. Yeah, some artists work crazy. Like for example, usually weekly updated manga is not really a healthy option for a lot of like manga artists. You need to come up with a plot, you need to do the meeting with the editor and talk about like what kind of like stuff you're going to plan to do. You need to do the actual drawing, and then you need to like finalize the product in a week. So you don't really have the time to like procrastinate, I guess. So you don't really have the time to actually play around. So some people are really quick with their drawings. Some people take too much time on their drawings and then get really fatigued. Some people don't really trust assistants. For example, mangaka Togashi-san, who's the Hunter x Hunter, who's the person, like the author behind Hunter x Hunter. He doesn't really trust assistants, so he's gonna try to do all this like drawings and the plot by himself, and he has a health condition as well, so it's gonna be really hard for him to actually do the mangas all by himself. But some people don't really trust assistants. On the other hand, some people heavily rely on the assistants. So some assistants have the privilege of like designing the entire characters and stuff, or designing the actual stories and stuff like that. Yeah, for example, Berserk's author was like tweaking 1 pixel because he was able to like notice on the screen, and he spent hours on the like finalizing that specific dot of the screen, and like I was like, you shouldn't do that kind of like stuff. Some people like really go on to perfection and like damage themselves during the process. Yeah, especially like on a 4K screen, you can see every dot, and like I do hear a couple of like artists like spending too much time on the higher resolution, and they don't realize that it's not gonna be able to see on print. It could, if the print quality improves, and then you have those kind of like quality prints in the future, it might have a bit of an effect, but usually it's not gonna get noticed. So spending the additional hours to actually perfect the pixels, or is it better to like move on and then add to the stories? I don't know. Well, if you're successful as a manga artist, then I think you have the like power to overcome the publisher's opinions. But if you're a guy who just starting out, and then you don't really have a fan base, that's not gonna happen, because you don't really have a say compared to a guy on the back of the publisher's side. He's gonna have more privilege and powers. So that kind of like stuff only happens if you're selling well, and it could have like a huge impact on your health as well. Yeah, recently they have an official app. I don't remember the name, but yeah. I don't usually buy manga in digital, so usually I buy them in physical form, or I just read the comics. So I just buy the single manga comic books, not the actual weekly stuff. I don't really recently I don't really have the time to actually read mangas, like, so I just noticed that I don't really read so much mangas now. And my focus, like, attention span is like getting really, really weak. I can't really read through one manga for some reason. I noticed the other day I was like reading manga, and then I was like fiddling around with a phone next to me, and I was doing both at the same time. So yeah. No, that's a bad thing. It's not amazing. If you're gonna try to read mangas, or like if you're gonna, oh hey, hello. So if you're gonna try to read mangas, or like if you want to like focus on one task, it's better to focus on just that task compared to like working on several stuff at the same time. Like currently, if I'm working on a task and then I start like, I have a bad habit of like opening up YouTube for some reason. So if I'm working on a task or like working on an artwork, and then if I start like opening up the YouTube tabs, it's not a good sign. Yeah. Same for like playing games as well. Like if I start playing games, I can't really like I'm I'm fascinated about my younger self. I had more attention spans, and like I didn't really give up until I had a better result. But now I'm like I really give up easily. And for me, that's sad because like I want to finish the game, but like I keep on like buying new games and not finishing them. But for me, like just doing sculpting for 8 hours is easy. So I don't know why sculpting is easy, but not like reading, or like not read, like just like watching stuff or in general. It's really easy to develop bad habits to your life. Like, for example, I started to like notice that I'm like watching YouTube videos while I'm eating things. Like, for example, eating dinner, eating lunch. And for me, like, I just noticed that happening, and I don't know why that happens, but that's not a good look, right? Can I call it done then? Nah, I need to do more parts and do more stuff before I call it done. Modifiers, curve mode, size fine, RGB. Stroke lazy mouse off. Oh, curve. Usually you can like determine or like you can estimate how the highlights are drawn, and then you can pretty much estimate what kind of like character or what kind of like age when it was drawn. Like for example, if I look at Sailor Moon, it looks pretty old right now, and that kind of like highlighting style is not common right now. You can like find a couple like comparisons between like the 90s, the 80s, and the 70s, and the aughts, and the recent like 10s. There's a lot of like informations around those kind of like stuff. How to avoid looking old, or how to avoid looking too much on a specific era. So I'm thinking about the hairs. We did twin tails last time, so I'm currently thinking I prefer to sculpt characters. Let's see. Duplicate, delete lower, making big chunks. Split. Split almost, delete. And maybe using depth closest. I noticed I have a habit of like making the hairs look pretty much similar in every model, so I'm gonna try to avoid that this time. Well, kind of like anime hairstyles is it is pretty similar, but it's not gonna be totally similar. It's not gonna be the exact same for each character. you can usually distinguish the two. So. Yeah, there's a Claymore fanatic in Thomas' channel. Hello, Daisuke Sensei. Any tips on polypainting those anime style eyes? Whenever I tried it, doesn't look right. Often the lines are not clean and distorted. Make it clean and non-distorted then. Well, I just painted the eyes right now, and usually I just do it freehand. So have enough resolution and then try to paint it straight. Like if you're having hard time like painting these, you can project the like reference images onto the model and then try to hand paint them. Sawaki does those kind of like workflows, so you can check out his stream. I don't do anything complex, so for me, like painting eyes is not really hard, but like painting a particular character's eyes is really hard. Like getting it right is the hard part. Like just painting or like painting to look good is not really that hard. I know it could be hard, but like you just need to do more and more and more. I don't know if you can hear on stream, but there's a bird tweeting outside of my window constantly. So like you can hear them like tweet 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 in the background. Hey, hi. Really? Yeah, they're saying, "Let me in! I want to sculpt." I have two windows. I have one on this side and one on that side, and the bird is on that side. And usually after lunchtime in Japan, the birds usually go on this side because there's a river next to it. Um, usually the windows get like knocked sometimes. Like the bird is like constantly annoying me. So sometimes I record a video on Pixologic JP, and I like explain stuff like what Joseph was doing, like explaining things, and then sometimes the birds noise get really intense, and I have to cut the audio so it doesn't have that bird like constantly tweeting at me. It's now getting intense, right? So. It's like bird ASMR stream with me constantly laughing. That's not my kind of like Twitter. That's not my kind of like birdie. I'm getting the overall like silhouette of the hairs first, so some people might wonder why are you not connecting these areas, because that's not really important when I'm looking at these kind of like silhouettes. So getting the silhouettes first is really important compared to the rest of the process. I can just connect them afterwards, or like use backface to like connect these like this, but for now it's not really important. Hmm. Maybe high up in the mountains then. By the way, it's currently 7:44 in Japan, so it's in the morning. I started the stream around 6:30, so I have 40 minutes to go for the stream. It's nice to see the discussion about Garage Kit starting to go on the right side over here, or at least seems. Yeah. I did get a couple like responses about like I did get a person who's like who was saying, "Oh fuck you, we don't get the garage kits over here, it's unfair," and stuff like that, it's pricey and stuff. Oh, I'm like, oh come on. I would like to know if you have a Discord community for sculptors for anime type of figures. No. I don't know how much people would like to join, but usually you can ask me questions if you have one in ZBrush Discord. It's in this side. If you look at the middle section of the stream, you can see a Discord invite or the Discord URL showing up, so you can join there as well. So do you demodel the person in static position, then make them to do the pose and straight up sculpt the pose? Yeah, usually my process would be that. I don't go into details with T-pose because my main sculpting workflow is for 3D prints and stuff. If you're doing for games, that's not the workflow. Usually you want the entire model to be T-posed and then get the details and then pose afterwards. But for me, getting the T-pose is not really important compared to game models and stuff like that. Yeah, I do think a couple of people would like to do anime figures, but I don't know. I don't know. It kind of feels like limited. I do see a rise in interest because of the Genshin Impact and stuff like that, but I don't know in general if that's the case. I do know there's a lot of like interest in like toon shading and stuff like that. Yeah, we can talk anime if you want. But usually, if you have any ZBrush related questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, like, I like Discord when it's not really taking my time from production. Like if I'm just like casually sitting there and then like someone pinging me, I don't really mind. But if I'm like doing some like production stuff or like making models and then people pinging me. It's really annoying as hell. So it really depends. You can turn it off as well, of course, but you feel missed out if you don't really respond. So how to make pretty anime girls in ZBrush. I'm just showing you. Like, I did a couple of streams in the past as well, so you can check those out as well. And you can check Saraki Kaoru's stream. He explains things in Japanese entirely, but you can see them visually and then follow through. He's the master of like the cleanest topology ever in the world for sculpting, and mine is more the dirty, quick and dirty topology stuff. I don't really prefer like if I spend the time actually getting the topologies correct, I can do it, but it's going to take more time for me, and I don't see a reason why to do it. I do have a couple of references, but I'm not really like reliant on those kind of like references right now. I do have a couple of like assassin images or like usual generic assassin type or knife. And a couple of like dark elf images, but that's pretty much it for now. I can collect more images if I go along, like if I have solidified a like what kind of like stuff I want to make. And then usually at the end of the sculpt I have like 200 images on the one reference sheet. Hey Cosmic Legends. I make some anime characters, but I want to become a pro figurine artist. In the West or in Japan? I don't know, like how much demand there is for Western markets to make, like Western artists to make Western artists to make Japanese figurines, Japanese style figurines in the West. Usually, it really like people import those kind of like sculpts compared to like relying them on the Western artists to do it. How is Joseph doing? Joseph left Pixologic. It's been a couple of months now, I guess. He's been busy working with game development stuff. Yeah, making figurines, like, it's not really huge, like, it's hard to say, like, it's not a big market, but it's not too small, like, if you know one guy, you can connect to a lot of people, but it's not too small enough that you can reach to the end and stuff like that. It's not that easy to go. Like, with a license stuff, not a lot, but people start to make 3D prints with no license. Yeah, I kind of see that. If it was Japan, it's gonna be really, really strict. If you're a Japanese artist and then if you're selling a 3D model without like licenses, that's not a good sign. Like, usually you get an angry message from the fellow artists, or sometimes you get a message from the license holders saying you can't do that. So usually Japanese like license are really strict and those kind of like stuff. Historically, it's been loose for comics or illustrations. Those are really permissive. Like they give you a bit of freedom, and unless it's gonna damage the reputation of the brand or the series. Like, for example, there was a court case with the Doraemon stuff or the Pokemon stuff, and because of that, people saw Nintendo as really, really strict against the fan art, but Nintendo itself doesn't really go after like casual fan arts or fan artists. But if they start to get really, really big, and then if they start to get tied with their brand, and that's not a good sign for them. So they take legal action if they needed to. So you have this kind of like blurry line that you can't really go across, or you don't want to go over it. But usually for the like 3D models or the figurine markets, it's really easy to go cross the line if you don't really know the rules. Like, for example, for garage kits, we have a 1-day license system in Japan. So if you're making a figurine which is licensed to a specific license, you have to ask permission to the license holder through a event organization or the event committee. Like, for example, if you want to join a Wonder Festival event, and then if you have a specific character, you have to ask OneFest if this is permitted, and then if I can get permission. And that's before like 6 months or like 4 months before the event happens. And then you need to fill out the form. You need to like specifically pay a fee for those kind of like stuff. I can't really disclose the amount of the fees, but you need to follow those kind of like protocols, and then you're able to like publish the garage kits. So those kind of like stuff exists, and if you don't know those kind of like rules, I know a couple of like artists who started to sell a figurine, like unlicensed figurine, on Yahoo auctions, on the auction sites, and they got really they got into trouble because other artists said that's not really how it goes. So the reason why artists are looking out for other artists, and then if they go over the border of those kind of like the lines, it's gonna like, they are strict because it's gonna affect the entire population or the entire figurine community as a whole. If someone is like making the lines blurry, or going across the lines really, really easily, so people look out for other artists' activities, and then if they cross a border or cross the line, they'll try to like pull them back to the line. So that's why they are really, really strict. But that's because they had a history of those kind of like the license holders being generous and then being forgiving. If you ask for permission, they will usually try to give you permission unless it's specific. Unless it's a specific publisher or a license holder, which could be known as really, really strict. Like, for example, if you ask permission from Nintendo for Pokemon stuff for Wonder Festival, usually you don't really get a yes. You don't really get those kind of like answers. Same for Dragon Ball stuff. You don't really get permission for making Dragon Ball figurines for Wonder Festival. So those kind of like restrictions exist. But usually artists follow the rules because the one-day license system entirely is built around like the license holders being generous. So if you make the license holders angry, entire community will suffer from it. And like we had a couple of examples where a license holder really got angry with a specific guy who was making illegal non-copyrighted or like non-licensed models, and then he shut down the entire section for that specific license. So that kind of like stuff is risky. So we don't want artists going across the borders and then like feeling that's okay. So for Japanese artists, we look out for each other and call out if that's not okay. Yeah, it depends on Fate's franchises. So we had one case where if you ask the animation studio to give you permission for a, I think it was Fate Apocrypha, and if you ask the anime studio to give you permission, they don't really, they say no. But if you ask the original company Type Moon to give you permission for Fate Apocrypha, they give you permission. So you kind of have those kind of like situations where one license holder would say yes, one license holder would say no. And usually animation companies and the original license holders have a different kind of like licensor agreement and stuff like that. So they have a separate kind of like policy. That kind of stuff exists. And like, for example, like Shuei publisher is really strict on their licenses. But if they do an animation and then the animation company is friendly with those kind of like fan arts, and if you ask the animation company, is it fine? They give you permission to do those kind of stuff. But it really depends on the license itself. So one anime could be fine, or one manga could be fine, but one other manga in the same publisher is not fine at all. So you have those kind of like stuff that you need to deal with, and that's the daily thing that we need to deal with in everyday Wonder Festival event or the figurine events. Would the licensor ever hire the artists? Usually it's not the licensors who are hiring the artists. Usually it's the figurine manufacturers hiring the artist and then asking the license holder if they could make the figurines or manufacture the figurines, paying them the fees. So it's not like Disney is making the figurines. They ask the manufacturers of the figurine manufacturers to make the Disney figurine characters and stuff like that. So it's the opposite. So the manufacturers ask the license holders. Sounds like a maze of trouble to make one character. Yeah, we need to deal with those kind of like stuff. And then we have guys like recasters making a copy of figurines and selling it on a half price, and then people buying that stuff, saying that's the way to go. And I'm like, people, like, you can imagine why people are pissed, right? Yeah, 1/4 for 1/3 of the price, and then they don't need to deal with this kind of like problem of like asking licenses, or they can sell whenever they want if they feel like it, but we have to sell it in one day on event locations only. We can't do any online sales. There's a couple of licenses where, like, for example, Evangelion is really forgiving for fan art. So if you ask the license agreement, they will give you permission to use that for a 1 year, is my understanding. And then you can sell it on online shops as well. Like, for example, if you have a booth account, you can sell it on there as well. But usually that's not the case for every licenses. So most of the licenses will just be able to sell on 1 day, or they will say no entirely. Yeah, so I had a couple of cases where people think the recast fake price is the legit price compared to the original, and so people were complaining about, oh, why is it so expensive compared to this? And because that's not legit. If somebody just joined in to the stream and have no context what I'm talking about, it's I had a talk. I had a small blog article made and talking about recast of garage kits. Recast of garage kits is basically a illegal version of your copy sold elsewhere without your knowledge, and it's really common in garage kits, and it's like, I don't know why, but it's widely accepted in the West, and I don't think it's really nice for the Western community to like rely heavily on that. And I summarized the situation in Japanese, and since most of the Japanese like figurine artists doesn't know about the Western community or how widely accepted it is, so it was a bit of a shock to them, and the blog article got like 400 retweets, and yeah, it was a big deal. So that's what I'm talking about. And then like there's a couple of people who are really pushing the agenda, or pushing the recast to be okay in the West. And for Japan, that's not really like, in Japan, if you talk about recast, you're kicked out of the community really easily. Like, that's a no. That's a huge no. Like, if you start talking about recast, your artist life or the artist career is ended. Like, it's boom, done. Get out of here. But it's widely accepted in the West, and it's a huge comparison. Like, and usually the narrative is getting twisted a lot. Like, for example, a lot of people think it's the right price for like if you see a 5,000 yen kit, like $50 kit, and people think it's really people think that should be the price for every kit, but if we start making the kits at that price, nobody's gonna make any revenue, or like even any cent of like revenue. So yeah, those kind of like stuff exists, but yeah. Yeah, well, those kind of like complex situations exist in garage kits, especially in Japan, and it's not really talked about in Japan as well. Like, people don't really talk about hard things, or like sometimes political stuff like this. It's kind of like controversial. But as an artist, like, I can't really forgive the idea of people thinking it's fine, or like the artists are like supporting or like forgiving those kind of like activities. So I can't really say it's like we support those kind of activities. Hmm. Yeah, I hope a couple of artists who can start selling original kits will allow more original characters or original based characters, and then be able to sell those kinds of stuff more compared to licensed stuff, because that will be more easier to like sell on the West, or like don't need to deal with the license holders like huge hurdle of like being accepted to be sold on online and stuff like this. But those kind of like situations are really hard. It's not going to change in one day, so I'm hoping it to be changed, but I know people don't want to change or risk change, because if the license holders say no, it's going to be really easy to shut down, or it's going to be easy to get rejected. So I understand people might be really scared of that kind of like situations happening. Why do anime girls' face look the same? They have a bit of a template around. Like, for example, if you follow a trend, it's gonna be look in a similar way, and if there's a famous trend going on, you try to replicate that trend, so it's not gonna be really different from that trend. 3D print to avoid the expensive delivery and tax import. Yeah, for physical kit, the importing tax and shipping fees is a huge issue. But for the license holders, because you have a physical kit, you have the estimate of like how many kits are being sold. And for the license holders, they don't want to have their like characters going out of their hands, or letting the fan art being sold like to 20,000 kits and stuff like that. It's not gonna be like that. They want a bit of a control over what kind of like amount it's getting sold, or if it's not gonna go outside of their hands. Like, for example, if they want the characters to be non-sexy, and then the fan artist like go ahead and make some really sexy stuff, and then it's gonna be a trouble for the license holders. So one example I think I can talk about is Madoka Magica. Madoka Magica's like skirt had to be like you weren't able to show the underwears underneath her skirts, so you had to fill the entire skirt with frills and stuff like that. So the license holders only accepted those kind of figurines to be able to be produced when those kind of like this status is met. So you have to fill the entire skirt with frills, and that's the only way you get permission from the license holders. That was one example, and a couple of other license holders will be strict about what kind of like paint you use. One example is, I think it was Nanoha series, and Nanoha had a really strict painting policy, or how the models should look, and they ask you to follow those guides as well. So you have those kind of like strict licenses as well as really, really loose ones, and it really depends on the license holders. Why would anyone sexualize anything? It's the internet. So yeah, there's really loose license holders. Like for example, Toho is you guys may know Toho Project is really loose on their licenses, and some people say it's free licenses, but it's not really a free license. And they have a guideline we need to follow, and then if you don't follow the guidelines, you're not gonna get permission from the Toho Project's author, Zun. So people sometimes mistake Toho Project because it's really, really forgiving in their agreements, but it's not a free license, and you have to follow the guidelines. Is it possible to make 80 retro anime style characters on ZBrush? Like for example Ninja Scroll? I don't know Ninja Scroll. Oh, wait. I may know Ninja Scrolls. Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah, you do see like 90s anime characters or 80s characters made by fans. Like for example, Sailor Moon is one example. There was an artist who was making Sailor Moon with the older style, like eyes and stuff like that. For me, it's a bit harder for me because I'm not really the person who's making those kind of like style of art. But it's not impossible to make. You can make it. Like it's gonna take a bit more time, but yeah, you can. Yeah, Sailor Moon was, I guess it was the beginning of 90s, right? It's the same period as the Evangelions. Wait, yeah, the original one was 92, so it's basically the beginning of 90s. and it got republished around the noughts and the 10th. Yeah. Kadokawa is hard on license because they look to check on the Western market and internet stuff like the Bookwalker. And I have even seen the announcement and translation of Konosuba TV RPG. Well, no, Kadokawa is pretty forgiving for fan arts. Like, depending on the license, though. For example, the license, like for example, what I'm making in my personal time, I make Toaru series. Toaru series is under Kadokawa's license agreement, but that stuff is not really hard to like follow. You don't really have the hard restrictions on how much stuff you can make. But they'll charge you like a couple of fees to actually follow up with the artwork, the price. Like usually the price goes around like 5 to 10% of royalty fees. So for example, if you plan to make a kit which is gonna be like 20k yen, and you're gonna have to pay 2,000 yen for per kit. So even if you haven't sold the kit itself, you have to pay for the kit. So for example, if you make 20 kits and 2,000 yen, no, 20 kits, and then you want to sell them for 20k, so you need to pay them 20 times 2,000 yen before you even sell any kits. So you have to pay 40k yen, basically $400. And then if you include the resin fees, the mold of the silicone molds, and then the time to make the actual original prototype, and the event, like joining the event itself, cost money, traveling back and forth between the hotel if you have the hotel, or the train if you're living in locally, those kind of like cost adds up, and there's no revenue, like basically. The 3D art style of Appleseed 2014 Vanquish or Final Fantasy Advent Children has a name, or is it just 3D anime? You don't really have a name, yeah. It's kind of like real, like how do you say it? Like we sometimes call it polygon face. Like for example, if you look at Dead or Alive series, those kind of like style of faces are really popular, but we don't really have a specific name for it. But if you want to talk to another artist talking about what like a specific style, you bring up those kind of like Final Fantasy, Advent Children, or those kind of titles, and they will instantly recognize it. Yeah, so basically if you have a drink with the artist after the event, then your revenue is basically gone. So you're not gonna make money, or you're not gonna make a bank with making figurines or making garage kits. And I know a couple of people who justify recasts would say otherwise. And they'll say, oh, the artist is making enough money, so why can't we just go ahead and make recasts or like buy recasts to justify it? But it's not the case. Like, nobody's making bank. And usually, most of the revenue, if we even make one, is gonna go back entirely to the next next artwork or the next work we're planning. So you have the overhead cost before you even begin as well. So where can I find your portfolio? I usually post this stuff on Instagram. So I summarize the sculpts, so you can take a look here. Well, if it's for like, if it's a company which is like chasing profits, it's more easier to make money because the license holders know they are a revenue-seeking organization because it's a company, right? So it's not a fan art. Like, every company has to make money, so they already know they have to make money. So it's not really hard for the manufacturer side to make money, but they're not gonna make bank for each figurine. Unless it's a really, really killer figurine. So one example I think I can talk about is Good Smile Company's Madoka Magica. And that Madoka really, really sold well. And it was really selling crazy. And the manufacturers, like the painting side or the assembling side, didn't really get to catch up. And they had to ask like multiple factories to actually get that model done. So in that case, I think that's gonna make enough revenue for a period like for a couple of like times. But that's just one example. So if one character is selling well, but the other character is not selling well, you need to balance out those kind of like damages versus the revenue. So you need to do those kind of like stuff as well. You did this character on ZBrush from scratch, or did you sketch then import to ZBrush? Well, you can see on the stream, like on the last stream I started the model from a sphere, basically. Like I started from this sphere over here. So you can imagine how, like you can see the entire process on the stream, how I made the entire body, and then how I'm able to like make these kind of like hairs and poses as well. So you can chase 2 streams and you can catch up on that. I'm trying to like explain the process, but if you don't know what I'm doing, or if you have any questions, you can feel free to ask. So the other stream is this one. This one. And the current stream will be archived, so you can watch my archives from here. I think it's the URL you're watching, so I would love to learn the process of cutting the models, but I never found anything about it. Usually I just use the slice curves. So the process would be like, let me save this first. Delete lower, and then like delete the subdivisions first, and then make a line like this with slice, and then split the two. And then you have the arm separated from the model. And then you'll need to like close the holes like this. And then what you want to do is use this close hole polygroups to like control the shape like this. Make it flat as well. And then you'll need to use the live boolean to eat into the surface like this. And that's basically how you do it. You add the cube as a key as well, and then you get the results. Because this part is thin, I would usually do the opposite, or because this is not really an important part to split, you'll try to like do other parts to do the splits, but this is basically how you do it. Yeah, Saki did a stream about that kind of stuff, and if you're interested, he's explaining things in Japanese, but you can visually follow it, and then if you have any questions, let me know. Let me see if I can track down that specific stream. Yeah, so if you watch the stream, he's gonna do the entire split. And also, you can find the ZBrush top tips. I think it was Ayman Akman. No, Ayman Actor, explaining you the articulation or the creating the keys on the model. So you can watch those as well. yeah, you need to like combine the hairs and then think about where to split by polygroups. Comic Legends, Ask ZBrush video is covered by currently Paul. Paul is doing some streams, so he's basically answering the Ask ZBrush questions from Twitter on live. So that's what he's doing. So if you have like questions related to ZBrush, then you can post them on Twitter, hashtag AskZBrush, and Paul will answer you on stream. Stream is sometimes better because you can ask questions live if you're not certain, if you don't really follow the instructions, and if you have any additional questions, you can ask them on the fly. And additionally, it's not going to take us so much like recording times or like redoing the stuff. So usually it's time effective and cost effective, and it's really nice for people to interact if they have any questions. What is better, buying ZBrush on a disc or buying it digitally? We sell ZBrush digitally, and then as a backup, we sell the digital disc. No, we sell the disc as a backup, so we call it a backup disc. So you're gonna buy ZBrush digitally, and then in addition to that, you can buy backup ZBrush disc, but usually you'll buy the digital download for ZBrush. Speaking of splits, how parts pieces is normal for a garage kit? You mean how many? Because I saw a crazy amount. It really depends. Like, it depends on the complexity of the model. Like, if it's like, for example, if it's simple like this, you're not gonna have a huge amount of parts. Like, you're gonna have like 2 or 3 parts, and then you're basically done. I guess it's 4 because you have the body and the head, and then you have the hair, and you have the back and front of the hairs. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4. Is the subtool grouping system gonna get improved? What do you mean by improved? What do you want? You mean the nesting in the folders? Yeah, I know there's a request for those, but it's sometimes hard to implement those. So if we add a folder like this, and it's gonna take up the UIs, and then if we have additional folders, then it's gonna additionally take much more space, so it's gonna get confusing. And for me, like, I don't really use folders that much. After the folders got introduced, and then after it got like a certain amount of time, like, I went back to not using folders that much. Like, I use folders at the end of the process. Like, if I have, like, for example, if I have the hairs entirely split into like several subtools, but that's pretty much it for my use. Like, I would like to like just go back and forth between one subtool and another, and I don't really need to go back and forth between the folders that much. Yeah, I understand what you want. Yeah. Okay, so it's already past 8:30, and I already did the 2-hour streams, so I think I need to finish because there's another person who's after me. Let me see. Yep, so I need to finish the stream and say hey to Derek. So in 20 minutes he's gonna start the stream, so I need to finish the stream. So hope you enjoyed. Next stream I'm gonna start making the cloths because it's gonna be cold. Well, thanks guys.